The Blue Ridge Mountains with their jagged peaks and whispering forests had always felt like a refuge. They were a place where the world fell silent, where nature enveloped you in a cocoon of serenity and isolation. For me and my best friend, the mountains were more than just a retreat. They were a tradition. Every year since we were 13, we'd throw our gear into the car and venture into the wilderness to camp. The ritual was familiar, comforting even. That was until last year when the mountains showed us their darker side. It began on a brisk autumn evening, the air tinged with the earthy aroma of decaying leaves. We arrived late, the daylight already hemorrhaging into the horizon. It was peak season and every decent spot was taken. Desperation drove us to a windswept ledge on the mountainside, where the gusts howled like unseen predators stalking their prey. Sleep came fitfully that night, with the wind clawing at our tents like desperate fingers. Morning arrived, and with it the sun. We left our exposed campsite behind to explore the nearby town. We spent the day indulging in the usual distractions, local beers, lazy conversation, and the kind of aimless wandering that only small towns offer. By the time we made our way back to the mountains, the light was once again fading. This time fortune smiled on us. We stumbled upon a secluded, picturesque spot farther up the mountain. The forest thickened here, the towering pines standing sentinel against the encroaching darkness. We set up camp quickly. Our tents nestled close to the fire pit, and the comforting crackle of flames soon filled the crisp night air. The world shrank to just us, our laughter, and the faint hiss of wind through the trees. Hours passed. Midnight came and went, and the fire reduced itself to glowing embers. The stillness of the woods had grown heavy, almost oppressive. It was then, as we sat nursing the last of our drinks, that a beam of light cut through the darkness. A flashlight. At first, it seemed harmless, a wandering hiker perhaps. But as the beam wavered and began to approach us, unease crept in like a slow, icy tide. Who hikes this deep into the mountains at 1 a.m.? The figure emerged from the shadows, a man mid-50s perhaps, dressed in a t-shirt and basketball shorts, a strange choice for the cold mountain night. A woman followed closely behind, her face pale and downcast, as if she'd rather vanish into the trees than stand before us. "Evening," the man said, his voice overly casual, almost rehearsed. We exchanged wary glances but nodded in return. His flashlight danced erratically, not on the ground as you'd expect, but over our tents, the fire pit, our scattered belongings. His eyes followed the same pattern, darting, searching, cataloging. The man talked incessantly, his words tumbling out in disjointed streams. He commented on our lantern, marveling at its design. He claimed to be former law enforcement, though the information came unprompted and felt oddly out of place. All the while his flashlight moved like a probing finger tracing invisible lines around us. The woman said nothing. She stood a few paces back, her arms wrapped around herself, as if shielding her body from more than just the cold. She avoided our eyes entirely. Then came the moment that froze my blood. The man swung his flashlight toward our tents, pausing just long enough to say, "Oh, that's where you were sleeping, huh? Nice setup." The words themselves were harmless, but the way he said them, the deliberate pause, the faint edge in his tone, made my stomach twist. My friend and I locked eyes, the same unspoken realization flashing between us. This wasn't a casual encounter. He was sizing us up. For what, we couldn't be sure. Robbery. Something worse. But the feeling was unmistakable, that primal awareness of being assessed, calculated. The man lingered for a moment longer, then abruptly ended the conversation. He turned and vanished into the woods, the woman trailing behind him like a shadow. We watched their flashlight bob and disappear into the blackness. The silence that followed was deafening. "We're packing up," my friend said, his voice a low hiss. I nodded. There was no argument, no hesitation. We moved quickly, extinguishing the fire and breaking down our tents in record time. The darkness pressed in around us, every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig making my heart hammer against my ribs. As we loaded the last of our gear into the car, a new fear gripped me. What if they were watching us from the trees? What if they came back? We drove down the mountain in silence, the weight of what had happened settling over us like a shroud. Only when we reached the safety of the main road did I dare to look back at the dark silhouette of the mountains. I still don't know what that man wanted or what might have happened if we stayed. But I do know this. Some places, no matter how beautiful, hold shadows deeper than the night. And sometimes the scariest things in the wilderness aren't the predators or the elements. It's the people.